Hello everyone, FPL Raptor here and welcome back to another video on my YouTube channel. In today's video we have my Game Week 21 transfer plans. It is time to get back into FPL, and in today's video I'll be discussing some of my early thoughts around my team. If you do enjoy today's video, please do smash that like button, make sure to subscribe as well. But without further ado, let's jump into it. So I don't want to spend too long on Game Week 20 because it feels like an age ago, and to be honest, it was a while ago now, but it was a really, really good week, and of course, therefore, I want to talk about it very, very briefly. I want to start with Areola. What a man. I have only had one return from a goalkeeper. No, that's a lie. Two returns. I think it was a Turner clean sheet and a Dubravka clean sheet. That is it this season. I sold Pickford at the worst possible time on my Game Week 8 wildcard. I can't seem to get the goalkeepers right. And when I saw Dubravka save that penalty, I was like, I've got it wrong again. I've somehow got the goalkeeper decision wrong in a week where it looked a little bit, in my opinion, obvious on paper. Areola came away with an 11 points, though, and he was actually brilliant in that game. Not only did he get the FPL points, but from a footballing perspective, he was brilliant. And I'm pretty happy over the next couple to have Areola in my team. Finally, decently happy with my goalkeeper. The rest of the defence, disaster. Porro 2, Trent was one of my transfers in, and he got 0, so not fantastic. Gabriel and Arsenal continue to really frustrate. Powell and Taylor only getting 1 point between them, so the defence continues to be shocking. I mean, 4 points from 5 players, and it was exactly the same again in Game Week 19, so not ideal. Maybe makes me think the defence aren't completely worth it, but we do have to think that Trent has been on an incredibly good run of returns, and I still feel like he is a really good option, along with Porro and Gabriel. We'll discuss all of that in today's video. So I'm not too disheartened by my defence. I'm still feeling quite optimistic, but recently they've just not been delivering for me. However, outside of the defence, everyone else returned. All 8 of my attackers, even including Darwin on the bench, got an attacking return. So the positives, absolutely brilliant that all of them returned. The one negative, if I can criticise my team and be a little bit negative, but I shouldn't be because it was such a good week for me, is that I actually captained the wrong attacker. I somehow, in a week where all of my forwards return, captained the wrong, also all my attackers return, I captained the wrong one. Saka and Alvarez both getting 7 points. Obviously, Salah, Foden and Palmer all getting double digits. In hindsight, should have just gone for Mr. Reliable in Mohamed Salah. He could have had even more if he'd have scored that penalty. Palmer was great. The one I'm most happy with, though, of course, is Phil Foden, because along with Trent, he was one of my transfers in for Game Week 20. So really, really happy to see a transfer immediately pay off. And I know now a lot of people are looking at maybe moving Salah and Son to Foden in Game Week 21. So I'm very happy to have him in place. And I did somehow get the benching decision correct as well. Darwin did return, but he was the lowest scoring attacker. So it was a brilliant week, absolutely delighted. I kind of needed that because it's been a bit frustrating recently. I've had a couple of greens and then I'll get a massive red arrow and I'll go all the way back down. So hopefully from here on in, after this little break, I'll kick on and get a nice run of greens. But Game Week 20 went very well. Let's now take a look at how my team looks for Game Week 21. So before we take a look at my team for Game Week 21, I just wanted to discuss some interesting stats that I've picked out from the last 6 game weeks. So I just go through, and I do this all the time really, I look at players' data in recent weeks to see if I can highlight a player that maybe other people haven't considered that might go on a really nice run. And I also do the same for teams as well. And I just thought in these videos, I might just show you some of the interesting stats that I've picked out. So this is from Game Week 15 to Game Week 20. And the first is actually around João Pedro. In fact, and yes, in this time, João Pedro has had 2 penalties. So this isn't non-pen. This is just XGI. But in the period over the last 6 game weeks, only Salah has better expected goal involvement than João Pedro at 4.5 over the last 6. So João Pedro is a player, we'll discuss him when we look at the forward section in today's video. He's a player that I am strongly considering. Unfortunately, though, most of us are maybe relatively happy with our front three, and we're kind of thinking the next forward transfer we make is going to be on Erling Haaland. So do we have a spare forward slot to not only bring in Haaland at some point, but to also bring in João Pedro alongside the likes of Alvarez, Darwin, Solanke, Watkins? Maybe less so. But if you are in a position to do so, the fixtures are definitely there for Brighton. And I think João Pedro's got to start more often than he doesn't. Richarlison is the next one, the player on the thumbnail, a player that I'm going to discuss quite a bit in today's video. He actually has the highest non-penalty expected goals at 3.46 over the last 6 game weeks and the most big chances at 7, despite only playing 378 minutes in the last 6. So his minutes haven't been perfect because obviously he was returning. But since then, the data that he's putting up is remarkable. I mean, to have the best non-pen XG in the league, out of all of the players that played, the likes of Saka, Salah, who have played pretty much every minute available, and the most big chances, it just goes to show that he really is a serious FPL option. And we'll discuss the fact that Son leaving might affect him, but It could even improve it if he's potentially on penalties, but maybe doesn't have the same service because Son has been creating quite a bit for his teammates. And even sometimes Son won't create directly for Richarlison, but the space that he creates by some of his movement will also benefit him. So we'll have to discuss all of that and think about it. But over the last 6, Richarlison has been unbelievable. The next is around 3 defenders. And 2 of them we've spoken about to death, right? Only 3 defenders have over 0.5 XGI per 90 over the last 3 of defenders that have played enough minutes, of course. And that is Porro, Trent, and Alex Moreno, who actually has the highest expected goals of defenders over that time as well. Moreno is a player that we really do need to consider. The only issue is, I'm led to believe that Luca Dean is not close to a return, i.e. not this coming game week, but in the next couple of game weeks, especially given how spread out they are, you would expect Luca Dean to return based on the timeline that we were given. And if that's the case, could he still be a bit of a rotation risk? Despite how good Moreno's been, Luca Dean has been that good as well. So I do just worry that even though before Moreno's injury, he was definitely first choice, I do just wonder if he's still a bit too much of a risk. But he's up there with Porro and Trent for attacking threat, and that has to be taken into consideration. We've then got some team data, and mainly around defensive data. Liverpool, Aston Villa and Arsenal have been the 3 best defences in the league for expected goals conceded. And it's very interesting, the 3 of them, because obviously you have Trent, and this just goes to show Trent is, I think, 2nd for expected goal involvement behind Moreno and then ahead of Porro. So he's in the top 3, as we've just spoken about. And Liverpool are the best defence in the league. On top of that, not even on this list, Liverpool are also the best attack in the league over the last 6. So Trent kind of feels like, whilst he's taken up a lot of my budget, and whilst I almost do slightly regret moving for him last week because he's taking so much of my budget, he's, let's say, one of the, if not the most attacking defenders in the league, playing for currently the best defence in the league and the best attack in the league. Yes, Salah leaving for AFCON will impact Trent and Liverpool as a whole, but you still have to say that Liverpool at the moment do look like the best team in the league. Aston Villa, the reason I wanted to discuss them is they were 2nd for expected goals conceded over the last 6. In terms of the 2nd best defence. But they've been very frustrating, right? They conceded against Sheffield United. They conceded against Burnley. Lots of people brought in Konsa. I brought in Pau Torres, which has been a bit of a disaster. But if you can take the risk on Moreno, or if you still want to move for an Aston Villa defender, this would suggest it's still not a bad idea. And then Arsenal are still up there for expected goals conceded. They're the best defence in the league for expected goals conceded this season. They're 3rd best over the last 6. And they still have to be considered as one of the best defences to invest in for FPL. So those are 3 of the defences that I'll be looking to invest in. Specifically, Liverpool and Arsenal I still think are worth it. And then when we're looking at the 2 worst defences in this league, you may believe this, you may not. Newcastle was fairly obvious because they just conceded over 7 XG to Liverpool, and their defensive woes have been well documented recently. But Spurs alongside them, they are the worst 2 defences in the league over the last 6. And across the season, Spurs have been very, very poor defensively. Newcastle now creeping towards mid-table across the season for expected goals conceded. So these are 2 defences that aren't as tight as you would want them to be, especially if you are investing in their assets. And I mean, this is an obvious point, but that means that they are worse defences than the likes of Burnley, Sheffield United, Luton. All of these defences that we say, right, we're going to target that fixture. We maybe need to see this over a longer sample size, but these are 2 defences where I'm seriously starting to consider that these are decent fixtures on paper. And then Sheffield United, a team that we've just mentioned, over the last 6, they are 8th for expected goals conceded per 90. They are top half of the table. And if you look over the last 3, they are even better. And I think under Wilder, Sheffield United will be even worse going forward. I know they've created some XG recently, but I feel like the way that they're setting up now is just don't lose. And it's kind of a strategy you can have in football where the aim is don't lose. And if you have the opportunity within that game where you are aiming to not lose, to nick a goal and potentially win, then that's great. But what you're aiming for realistically is like a 0-0 draw and then nick a goal. And the likes of Deitch did that at Burnley, maybe doing it less so at Everton, but it can be pretty successful, especially for teams that don't have the ability to go out there and beat teams. And it's realistic and it's working for them. So again, maybe you want to see this over another 2 to 3 game weeks, because they did concede quite a few expected goals to, I think, Liverpool and Chelsea, Sheffield United. But let's see it over a few more game weeks. If they continue to be like this, we then need to change our perceptions again. They will not be a team where you wouldn't mind if you play against them, but you're not going to go out and say, right, Sheffield United at home, as we did before, is the best fixture in the league, because at the moment, it's not. At the moment, Newcastle at home is probably the best fixture in the league. So these are just some things that I've noticed over the last 6. If you want to see me continue doing this, do let me know. I'll probably do it every 2 or 3 sort of transfer plans videos just to go over what we've seen and different trends that are happening. Now let's take a look at my team for Game Week 21 and where I'm currently planning to use my transfers. So I'm not going to do this in too much depth because on Thursday I'll have my actual team selection video where I go through every player and discuss what I'm thinking about them for the coming weeks. And I'll go through my plan for future weeks in a bit more detail, i.e. selling Son and Salah, bringing them back in, bringing Haaland back in, blanks and doubles. We'll discuss sort of longer term plans in more detail. But here, I just want to kind of tell you where at the moment I feel like my one transfer and a potential hit might be in my team. So the goalkeepers, at some point, I would probably like to make a goalkeeper change, but considering it's Sheffield United away, and I've just spoken about the fact that they are better defensively at the moment, Sheffield United, but they're certainly not much better going forward, I think this is actually a pretty good chance for a clean sheet for West Ham. They do have some potential injuries, mainly to their attack, actually, which could, of course, affect them defensively if they're not able to retain the ball as well, but I still feel like that's fine. So the goalkeepers this week, perfectly happy with. And the defence, to some extent, I am happy with. Unfortunately, and it is a little bit unlucky, but this happens to teams and managers across the season, I do have defensive injuries at the moment. So I've got Pau Torres and Taylor that are currently flagged. I don't know how serious Taylor's injury was. It was apparently a knock. The issue that we've got with the Taylor injury is that Burnley's game has been moved from the Monday or Tuesday to the Friday. So it's been moved 2 or 3 days earlier. And that obviously means that he's got less time to recover. If Taylor is out, that removes 1 sub for me. And then Pau Torres isn't in full team training at the moment. I don't even believe he's out on the grass in individual training yet. At least a couple of days ago, that was the case. So Pau Torres, this injury with him seems to be reoccurring. And maybe as a result, they kind of rushed him back a little bit last time. Maybe they'll take it a little bit more easy with him. And maybe he won't be available till 22 or maybe even 24. Because remember, 23 is directly after 22. It's quite soon after. So if he's not back for 21, it could even be 23 or 24 that I'm waiting for a return. That obviously isn't ideal. But the reason that I'm not too stressed at the moment, at least, and fingers crossed it stays this way, is Porro, Trent and Gabriel are absolutely fine. And I am happy with most of my other attackers as well. So I'm hoping there's less chance than usual of needing the bench, but you never know. And of course, Gabriel is prone to the odd benching. And when he does get benched, he's unlikely to come on. But I am happy with that back 3. I would argue that is possibly the best back 3 that you can get in FPL. Just simply because, like I said, Porro and Trent are 2 of the best 3 attacking defenders in the game. Arsenal and Liverpool are 2 of the best defences in the game. And I think Areola's fine for a cheap goalkeeper. So that defensive setup I am very, very happy with. When it comes to my other players in my team, you can see the captaincy armband on Saka. We'll discuss captaincy later in the week. I'm not set on that. To be honest, I don't think there's a stand-up captain unless Erling Haaland is fit. The other players, though, Saka, Foden, Palmer, Watkins, Alvarez, Darwin, there are, of course, criticisms you can make of pretty much all of those players. But given the fact that I have 2 defensive injuries, possibly, Son and Salah in my team, and only 1 free transfer, the 1 free transfer at least has to be used on taking out one of Son and Salah. It doesn't make sense for me to start saying, well, Darwin's minutes could be reduced, or maybe Foden and Alvarez. It needs to be to remove one of Son and Salah. Of course, I could then take a hit to remove both of them, or I could take a hit to use the funds to maybe make another move. For example, let's say I wasn't happy with one of Foden or Alvarez. I thought their minutes might be reduced. Then, of course, I could take a hit to remove them. But I think largely I would expect those 6 players there to start. Saka, Foden, Palmer, Watkins, Alvarez and Darwin. I would expect all 6 of them to start. On Foden and Alvarez, because I know there will be a lot of stress around them given that KDB is now back and Haaland should be nearing a return at some point. Of course, Haaland wasn't in the team in their recent domestic cup game. And I think the fact that he wasn't in the squad probably means he's not ready to then just go and start the game against Newcastle in Game Week 21. So my early prediction, but again, I'm recording this on Monday evening, is probably that Haaland isn't available. So for me, I'm not currently making too many transfer plans around Haaland being available. And on Kevin De Bruyne, there were actually some quotes coming out after the domestic cup game where he basically said he's very happy to be coming back, but he doesn't think he's quite ready to start the games in succession, and he thinks he'll therefore be back on the bench for Newcastle. He actually specified that he thinks he'll be back on the bench for Newcastle. So I think by all accounts, based on the information that we currently have, at least for Game Week 21, I would expect both Foden and Alvarez to start once again. We don't know that, but I think it's a very important game. I don't think they'll want to put Kevin De Bruyne or Erling Haaland into the starting 11, given the likely high-intensity game that it will be against Newcastle. So I would expect both Foden and Alvarez to start. Longer term, of course, they could pose issues, but for now, they're fine. Palmer is obviously really, really good, did so well last week, is a genuine captaincy shout this week. I'm not bothered by Saka. I think he's been absolutely fine recently. He's not been converting, but the data has been pretty strong. He is still on pens, he's on set pieces, and I still feel like sooner rather than later, the Arsenal attack will click. I don't think they're going to go like this the entire season. I think very, very soon we'll start to see them find another gear, and I think they'll start scoring goals. And then Watkins, obviously, is Watkins absolutely fine, not a priority to deal with at the moment. Love having him. And then Darwin's probably the trickiest one at the moment because I just don't know what Liverpool are going to look like without Salah. I don't know if it will massively affect them in a negative way. Maybe it will mean that the goals are then spread out to the likes of Darwin a little bit more. Maybe it will mean that the structure of the team is completely off and Darwin has to drop to the left and they try and experiment with Gakpo and Jota through the middle. I don't yet know how it's going to impact him, but all I'm thinking is he will still get chances, as was evidenced by the game against Arsenal. He still did get one massive chance and he will continue to get those chances. And there is a small chance that he is on penalties. Now, I've seen certain people dismiss that and go, of course he's not on pens, it'll be Szoboszlai or McAllister, but Darwin has taken 12 penalties in his career at a senior level and he's scored all 12 of them. He recently scored one for Uruguay in October, and he also scored one for Liverpool this season. I think it was in Europe. So he is a player that in recent months has taken penalties, and he scored them. And I wouldn't put it past him stepping up and taking the pen. And you have to remember again, Szoboszlai sometimes, but McAllister in particular won't always be on the pitch. So it may well be that Darwin is the one on the pitch that is first in line for pens. I've seen some people suggesting it could even be Trent, but I think that is less likely. However, I think for the time being, Darwin has shown me enough recently, despite what some people think, for me to keep him at least for another week or two, and then he may well be the one that gets moved to Haaland. So to put that all together, the back three starting I'm happy with, goalkeepers I'm happy with, my 6 players that I own that are starting in my attack, or that are at least available, I'm happy with as well. It is, of course, only Son and Salah that I have an issue with because they are not available, and I need to replace at least one of them. If I only replace one of them, there is a chance I have no bench. I'm not too worried. If I end up playing with 10 players, I end up playing with 10 players. I'm not sure I want to take a hit just to be able to bench one of my attackers. It doesn't feel like the best transfer plan for me. If one of Pau Torres and Taylor are confirmed out for a long time, then I could, of course, make a defensive transfer, and that may make a little bit more sense. When it comes to, do I think, who out of Son and Salah do I think I will replace? I think for me at the moment, unless I want to bring in Haaland in 21 as part of a hit, but I don't think that'll be the case, I think I'm leaning towards replacing Heung-min Son. The reason for that is I have exactly the same money tied up in both Son and Salah, so I'm going to lose value on whoever I sell. I just think there's a very small chance I keep Salah until he returns from AFCON. I don't think I will, but there is a bigger chance for me that I keep Salah than I keep Son. The reason for that is there is a decent chance now that Liverpool will blank in Game Week 26. And if they blank in Game Week 26, but continue to progress in the FA Cup, they are likely to then double in 25. If Liverpool double in 25, and I think it's going to be a pretty decent double as well, then I would probably want to have Mohamed Salah captain. Now, of course, you can free hit in 25, but I guess I want to open up the opportunity to not use my free hit in 25, have Salah in my team anyway, and therefore, I know this is lots of thinking ahead, anything can happen over that time. I think there is more of a chance that I want to keep Salah than Son. I will likely sell Salah in 22 anyway to bring Haaland back in, but I want to give myself the option to move to Haaland whilst retaining Salah. Hopefully that makes sense. So to simplify all of that, if you're bored by now of listening to that, the plan at the moment is probably to just use the one free transfer to replace Son. So I just need a midfield replacement for Son. I can therefore get pretty much anyone in the game that I could possibly want. So let's now take a look at my watch list and who I'm currently planning on bringing in. So as I said, I'm not currently planning on making a defensive transfer, but there is a possibility that I do, and it would be if one of Pau Torres or Charlie Taylor are confirmed as being out for a couple of months, because then I'm sat there with yes, no bench, but also a player that I know I'm going to need to transfer out anyway, and therefore there is a possibility that I make that move to not only allow me to deal with one of my defenders, but also to mean that I do have at least one substitute. My only concern with that is if I do bring in a defender, let's say one of these 3, Walker, Estepinian or Doty, who are my top 3 possible replacements if I need them at the moment, it still means that I then have to bench one of my other players. I would have to bench, if I want to start Walker or Estepinian, I would then have to bench a Gabriel, or I just put that defender on the bench anyway, which then makes me think, why am I taking a hit to bring in a defender? So at the moment, the plan is probably not to bring in a defender. If I am to, of course, the top of my list is Estepinian, and that's just because his attacking threat is outrageous. But on top of that, let's say even if you removed the attacking threat of Estepinian, which is fantastic and the main reason that you would want to bring him in, Brighton have improved a little bit defensively recently. Not much. They aren't a great defence by any means. We've not seen them hit the heights of what they have across the previous 2 seasons, but they have improved slightly. They have now kept a clean sheet in the Premier League, and the fixtures are very good. So I just wonder, with Estepinian coming back, is it going to make them a little bit stronger defensively? And also the attacking threat he gets as well, and the fixtures. I think it is a really nice transfer. And I think if you do need a defensive move this week, or maybe you just want to make a defensive move and switch to a 4-4-2 and maybe retain one of the midfielders of Son or Salah, I think Estepinian is probably the one you should look to bring in. And I think he is a great option. The reason Doty's on there, of course, he has fixtures to be rescheduled. So he's going to have 2 double game weeks at some point, and he's just got really, really high attacking threat. So whilst I don't think there'll be many clean sheets for Luton, he does need to be considered. And Walker's a very safe option for potential clean sheets. Man City will probably have a double in 25 or very, very soon if it's not in 25. And therefore, I feel like he is still a decent option despite the lack of attacking threat. But defensive-wise, I don't think that I'm going to be making a transfer this week, at least at the moment. I'll then skip the midfielders, look at the forwards very briefly. João Pedro is probably top of my list at the moment, along with Ivan Toney, the forgotten man, because at the moment, it looks like he'll slot straight back into that Brentford team. I believe he scored a hat-trick recently for the Brentford reserves or under-23s. He played a game, obviously not for the Brentford first team, but he scores goals. He's on penalties. Brentford desperately need him at the moment. The fixtures aren't awful. I really don't mind a punt on Ivan Toney. But again, we're going to bring in Haaland probably in Game Week 22, assuming he's available then. It will probably be Toney or João Pedro that then goes out, unless you want to sell Ollie Watkins or Solanke, and that doesn't feel great. Maybe if you've got an Alvarez or a Darwin spot in there, it makes it a bit easier. But I feel like at the moment, that forward transfer and that forward spot in your team, you're probably looking at moving that to Haaland at some point. So for me, at the moment, as I said, Son to one of the midfielders on this list is most likely. And in my Game Week preview video, which will be out on Wednesday, I'm going to cover midfielders in so much more detail. I'm going to go through all of the possible options, differential punts, cheap options, mid-price, more expensive ones. Do I think De Bruyne is an option? Stuff like that. So do make sure you subscribe to the channel to see that video on Wednesday. But I've tried, for me at the moment, narrowing it down to the 5 options that are most likely that I would bring in. And the 2 most likely options are Bowen and Richarlison. Now, I am recording this on Monday evening after the Bowen injury scare, should we call it? So he went down in the final minutes of the game, and he had to get not carried off, but he had his arm around someone, and they were essentially helping him to get off the pitch. And it didn't look particularly good. He looked in a lot of pain. And it's not that he went down to waste time, because the final whistle went. So it certainly didn't look good. However, I've seen some people suggesting, based on the clips, I've not seen them, that it could be a knock or an impact injury. They do have 2 weeks until their next game, West Ham. The sad thing is we're not going to get a press conference for West Ham, because the press conference for Game Week 21 for David Moyes will be after the Game Week 21 deadline. So we're not going to, unless someone leaks training pictures or unless we get some insider information, we're not going to get a press conference around Jared Bowen. And if we don't get a positive update, if someone doesn't show me physical proof that Jared Bowen is in full training, as a non-owner, I don't think I can bring him in. Of course, if you own him, start him, keep him. Definitely don't sell him. But it seems like such a risk to take, especially when I've got no bench, to bring in a player that I don't even know is going to be fit. My early prediction is that it'll be fine. Jared Bowen is very rarely injured. He's only had like 2 or 3 injuries in his entire career. He'll probably be fine, but it is a little bit of a risk to bring him in now. And therefore, at the moment, probably the most likely transfer for me is Richarlison. We just spoke about how good his data is this season. He's sat on a 0.6 non-penalty XG per 90 this season. His data is unbelievable. There is very little to dislike about him. The only concern around Richarlison is there are rumours going around, and they look pretty legit, that Timo Werner is on his way to Spurs. And at least that Spurs are looking, even if they don't get Timo Werner, at bringing in another attacker. So straight away, you've then got 4 attackers for 3 spots. But of course, Kulusevski can play in the 10. So it could be Kulusevski in the 10, Brennan Johnson on one wing, Richarlison or Werner on the other, and then the other one through the middle. So you could still play all 4. However, Maddison will be nearing a return very, very soon. And Heung-min Son isn't going to be away at the Asian Cup forever. It's a maximum of 4 game weeks. So yes, Richarlison is probably fine for the next 2 to 3. You would imagine, regardless of if they bring in Werner straight away, regardless of how close Maddison is, with the way he's playing, Richarlison is probably fine until, let's say, Game Week 23. However, from sort of 24, 25 onwards, you could imagine that his minutes will be reduced. So you are almost booking in a transfer there, unless you are super confident that he will continue to get minutes even once everyone's back. So I think it's fine. I don't think I want to overthink this one too much and say, oh, there's too many risks. He's looking brilliant at the moment. The fixtures are there as well. Manchester United are not defending very well, so even the immediate fixture in 21 is quite nice. So I really like Richarlison. The 3 other options, if it's not Bowen and it's not Richarlison, are currently for me Ødegaard, Gross and Eze. There are just issues associated with all three of them that I'm not massive fans of. Erdegaard's attacking data really hasn't been that brilliant this season. Creative-wise, he's been much, much better recently. But across the season, he's lacked in creativity in comparison to past seasons. His goal threat has never been particularly good. And Arsenal aren't clicking. Now, I said I expect them to start to click soon. But do I want to go back onto the Arsenal double up in the attack? I had Martinelli and Saka recently. And it was so frustrating owning two Arsenal attackers. So I'm less keen on that as a result. Gross and Eze... Gross just feels really boring. I don't know what it is. I think it's because in the past he's played very defensively. He's playing more like a box-to-box midfielder if you look at his touch map at the moment. So whilst you'll see him pop up all over the place, he'll pop up at right back on the right wing. He is generally playing all over the pitch. So he's not an out-and-out attacker like Richarlison. He's not going to pop up in the box on a regular basis and score tap-ins as Richarlison will. But his technique and his technical ability is fantastic. He'll score long shots. He will take penalties almost definitely when João Pedro isn't on the pitch, which is quite often, to be honest. So there's a possibility for a penalty. And his data has been okay. Not overwhelmingly good, but it's been okay. And for his price with the fixtures that they've got and the security of minutes, I do still feel like Pascal Gross is an option, but it feels a bit boring. And then we've got Eze. Eze's probably, if I'm looking at bringing in a cheap midfielder at the moment, and the reason I like a cheap midfielder, by the way, is it just gives me more money in the bank and more options to potentially keep Salah next week if I want to bring in Haaland in 22 and still retain Salah. So bringing in Eze just makes it a little bit easier for me to explore other options in my team. And I do like Eze. The data has always been good. Even in the absence of Elise at the start of the season, it was still good. He will definitely be on penalties now that Elise is injured for... I think the current prediction for Elise was around 4 weeks, but it could be longer. So I think Eze's got a lot to like. But Crystal Palace are very inconsistent. The fixture in Gameweek 21 is far from ideal against Arsenal. And it kind of feels like a week too early to bring him in. And also a bit of a risk given that Crystal Palace have struggled a bit this season. So I love Eze, but maybe not the perfect transfer in. And so therefore, like I said, I think if Bowen is confirmed as fit, it still probably will be Jared Bowen that I bring in. But even if Bowen is confirmed as fit, I am still tempted by Richarlison. His data is better. I think he's playing in a better attack. And he's got the possible addition, which Bowen doesn't have, I don't think, of penalties. I think even if Paquetá's out, I think it will be Ben Rama. And even Ben Rama isn't on the pitch, I still think it will be Ward-Prowse ahead of Bowen. So I don't think Bowen's getting pens. Richarlison could well do. So there it is. If we just go back to my team now, this is the way the team currently looks with the possible transfer of Son to Richarlison. I would obviously then have no free transfers, so ignore the graphic above me. I'd have no free transfers. I probably wouldn't take a hit. My bench would be looking shocking, right? If anyone misses out, I'd probably be screwed unless we get a positive update around Pau Torres or Charlie Taylor. But if I need my bench and I don't have a player and I have to play with 10, I think I would rather that this week than take a hit to just have a sub when I might not need that sub anyway. And I like the idea of hanging on to Salah until Game Week 22, because before Game Week 22, we're going to get a little bit more information about future blanks and doubles. And it may be that we get a more likely confirmation of a possible double in 25 and then a blank in Game Week 26. So I think holding on to Salah one more week feels like a decent shout when I don't need to replace him at the moment. That's the team. Let me know what you think of those transfer plans down below. Make sure to subscribe as well, because there'll be more content throughout the week as well. So guys, there you have it. That's my Game Week 21 transfer plans video. Hopefully you did enjoy it and got some use out of it. And if you did, please smash that like button and make sure to subscribe as well. I've set myself the goal in 2024 of 150,000 subscribers. So if you are new here and you want to join me on my journey and get regular content as well, make sure to subscribe. Until next time, thank you very much for watching. Cheers. Bye-bye.